Welcome, class. We are going to look at chapter 3 this week, jails, correction at the local level. All right, so you may wonder how the jails how did they become established? Um, we all know what jails are. Usually, our local police department manages a jail, and if you are arrested uh, and taken to jail, that's one of the first parts of the correctional system that you partake of. So it's considered the entryway to corrections. They come from the feudal practice in England, and this was around the 12th century. Back then, they had what they call the sheriff, and we derived that from the word shari, from the word sheriff that we have today. And he patrolled the share or sheer, and they were responsible for catching people who had broken the law and placing them into custody. And the law back then in England was the king's law. So you had different parts of the community, tides, you'll learn about those, where people would gather in the community and come together to protect the community. This was before the sheriff or sheriff. And then you later had the constable, which is not the same constable that we know today. This constable had law enforcement duties. So the English, we got a lot of what we learned from England and brought that over to the United States for what we see today as our police departments, our sheriff's departments, and all of those. A lot of that traditions and things that you see came from England, and we brought them over into the American colonies. Today, like I said, the jails are the entryway into the correctional system or the criminal justice system, and it's usually where we confine people from minor violations to very serious violations. So, who's in jail? Any of us could be in jail, to be honest with you. But today, jail is made up of two kinds of people: those who are awaiting trial and people who are sentenced to terms of confinement for less than a year. So, less than a year of duration you're in a jail. And that's important to note. Remember, I said this in a previous lecture. Jails normally house people that are there for a year or less. Prisons are going to house people with more serious offenses for more than a year up to death. Jails house mostly young men. Uh, they are disproportionately housed, or African Americans, excuse me, are disproportionately placed in jails. The majority of those in jails are serving time for crimes, um, or some may be waiting, have been convicted and are waiting to go to prison, and some may be there. You may have some that go in for revoking or being revoked from probation, or not probation, but parole. The kind of jails we have in the United States are the smallest are the police lockups. A lot of police stations will have a small jail inside the police station, and that's managed by the police station. Most county organizations or sheriff's departments has a jail inside of them, which is managed by the sheriff. Some of them have places like Hinds County. Most of the people that are arrested within Hinds County go to the Raymond jail. Although Jackson has a little bit of a holding facility there, they'll take them to Raymond to be where they'll be housed in that jail there, and the sheriff has a responsibility of that jail. We call that a regional jail. Some of the issues that we face in jail, we know today we have COVID-19 is a big issue in jails and prisons. Funding, of course. You want to be sure that a person is not in jail too long. So if they're awaiting trial, you want to be sure, according to their constitutional amendment, that they get a speedy trial and they don't sit in jail for 2 3 years before they go to trial. And one of the issues with jails from the inmate perspective is that jails are not going to have those programs that you would have in prison. So if you went to prison and you could participate in religious programs or educational programs, jails aren't like that. They're not intended for long-term stay, so they don't have all of the luxuries that they would have in prisons. So some of the other issues could be people that are enter and they're addicted to drugs, people that enter and have mental health problems, people that do not have money to bond or bail out of jail, so they have to sit there until the trial date. And in larger cities, it's very difficult for that date to come about. All right, now we look at bail and being held on bail is one of the issues. Another issue we have in corrections, because we look at whether or not a person that's held on bail is actually being held fair. Is it fair that a person that may not have funding can be held on bail, whereas a person that may not have an issue with money can bond out? You can bond out by using a bailsman. Another way is paying the courts. And so there are a number of ways that you can bail out. Some people are released on their own recognizance, or ROR is what we call that. So a number of different ways that people can bail out. And when we look at that ROR, look at bail in general, we look at whether or not a person is going to pose a threat to society. And that just means that the crime that they've committed is just so heinous that it will shock the nature of society if we let them out. For example, if you shoot or kill 8 to 9 people, letting you out will be a danger to society. And they also look at whether or not you're a flight risk. All right. We'll also look at the problems with jail administration. Those people who work in the jail, of course, you know that they're liable for the treatment of people that are incarcerated. And so this can become problematic because we have standards in jails. A lot of the systems don't pay enough for the correctional officers. And so you have people that may not be fully educated or may not have a lot of moral values that work in the jails. We do have also people that are well deserving and are awesome employees that work in jail. So there's, you know, kind of a gamble with that. Because jails often pay less than the recruiting, they don't recruit as much. And some of the jails are just old. There's an example of an old jail in the picture that I have here. They're old and they're hard to maintain, and because the funding coming in has to be divided among a sheriff and his deputies, or chief and his officers, then a lot of that funding may be overlooked for the inmates. All right, we will look at some new developments in jails. Now we have jails that are called new generation jails, and these are jails that were created to make it safer for the inmates as well as the correctional officers. They're different than those old-fashioned podular styles. We have direct supervision jails. We'll get into all the different kinds of jails that we have. And just on the fun side, we also have some jails that are paid to stay jails, where you could, if you have a certain amount of money, you could pay and live, not have to wear the uniform, have a TV, have different things that you can buy. And so we'll get to look into that this week in this chapter. All right, your assignment this week, you will be completing an assignment. You don't have a discussion post, so make sure that you look at that assignment. If you don't understand what it is, then make sure that you reach out to me so that I can help you help explain it to you. Remember, when submitting those assignments, be sure that you answer all the questions fully, and that you submit your assignments by Sunday before 11:59 p.m. You guys are doing well. Just make sure that you pay attention to your announcements that come out, and make sure that you enter the course through modules so that you don't miss out on any assignments. All right, have a great week.